It's good to be with all of you this lovely Tuesday. Our first viewer says, "Why do I hold grudges?" For example, a man was rude to me in the gym yesterday, and I'm still mad about it. Well, we don't like it when people hurt us. It's pretty simple. I run a truck over your foot, you won't like that. I run a truck over your feelings, you're not going to like that either. And we hold grudges because when we're hurt, when we're injured, one of the worst parts of being injured is a sense of helplessness. We don't like feeling helpless. We don't like feeling like we can't prevent that from happening again. And so when we get mad at people, we get a kind of sense of power, sense of strength, condemning them. We feel superior to them. In our minds, we do terrible things to them. We insult them. We hurt them back, even if they're not around. Well, that's how can son of a control. When we do that, we're relieving our helplessness by assuming a position of what seems like power. And it is. It's an artificial sense of power. It's an imitation love kind of power, but it feels better than just feeling lost and helpless. So we do that. And, you know, when this guy was rude to you in the gym, what was he saying? No matter what it was that he said or did, he was saying, "I don't care about you." That's what we hear when people are angry, when they inconvenience us, when they're critical, whatever. So you heard, "I don't love you," and you didn't like it. Who does? And the biggest reason that you didn't like it was not because of what he said, but because of how empty you were. Because when anybody feels, I'm just using myself as an example, when we feel full, when I feel unconditionally loved, and then somebody's rude to me, I just really don't care. In fact, then I can see them and their emptiness and their pain and their fear and the fact that they're drowning, and I realize it's not really about me. So that's really kind of the solution, isn't it? It's to get enough unconditional love in our lives so that when people treat us badly, they're not taking our last $2, and then it doesn't bother us. And then, of course, the other part of it is an intellectual reframing of the whole event, which just means telling the truth. It's not clever. It's just telling the truth. So I tell the truth about the other person. Now, we think telling the truth about the other person means saying, well, he was a rude, selfish pig. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but we don't tell the rest of it. Now, there's some, schools of thought that question whether the other person even was being a rude, selfish pig. See the positive in it. And was he really being rude? Yeah, actually, most of the time we accurately perceive it. Yeah, he really was. And being selfish and inconsiderate and thoughtless. But we don't tell the rest of the truth, which is he's behaving that way because he doesn't know another way to behave. He's empty and afraid himself, walks around perpetually wounded, and so when anybody does anything to inconvenience him, when a breeze blows by, it doesn't take anything when you feel really wounded, he lashes out to get a sense of power over other people. So that's the rest of the truth. And when I see the rest of the truth about that person, that they're just empty and afraid and drowning, gosh, pretty hard to be mad at somebody who's drowning. So that's part of telling the truth. Telling the truth about the other person. The whole truth, not just the part we like or that's obvious. And then the other part is telling the truth about ourselves. The reason that I get irritated is because I'm being selfish. I'm saying, how dare he have done that to me, to my wonderfulness, to my greatness. It really is selfish every time I become irritated. And when I can tell the truth about that it's out of my own emptiness and selfishness that I'm irritated, it's very hard to continue. And I'm not saying it will always stop it, and I'm not always saying that we're capable of stopping our anger in an instant. But if I consistently tell the truth about it, boy, the tendency is just virtually overwhelming that I will eventually stop doing whatever that thing is. So telling the truth is it's a very powerful thing in altering any behavior. This next viewer says, I've been listening in on some of the conference calls. I find them useful as the principles you teach are effective, and I'm grateful, but I have a problem. When I first started to listen in on the conference calls, I was encouraged by the candor and honesty among people. I find, though, that there's an issue of privacy, at least in my mind. I have been involved in sessions where it feels like there's a lot of gossip going on, where people actually talk about the private problems of people who are not there and offer solutions. I've listened in on a lot of conference calls, and sometimes people do speak inappropriately about people who are not there, especially if it's critically. But the people who show up on conference calls also give their permission to participate in both a learning and a healing experience that everybody is party to. So sometimes in illustrating a point, it actually can be appropriate to say. Now, this is very much like the experience that we saw a week ago when Fred had the interaction with Susan. When Fred did that, what he was doing was being afraid and so on. When you come to a conference call, you're giving your permission to be a subject. So when you say it's an issue of privacy, not really. If you want to be healed, you're going to have to talk about yourself. You're going to have to tell the truth. And the odds that you're going to get better just telling the truth to yourself are small. Most people can't do that. We have to participate in experiences where other people see us, where other people talk about us. We're going to have to expose ourselves to some occasions when people don't even handle what we say very well. But we're all learning in this. And I'm not justifying the mistakes that people do sometimes make, just saying they're inevitable. And it's the price we pay for growth. There's no way in this world I can learn and grow without making mistakes that affect the people around me. And if there's no way I can, there's no way you can either. So the price of my being happy and your being happy is that we will inconvenience and sometimes hurt each other. Well, I'll be darned. So what happens is when we make our mistakes, we go, oops. When other people make their mistakes and inconvenience us, well, then, we want to call out the police and haul them to jail and have a quick trial and have them summarily executed behind the jailhouse. So we just all make mistakes together. And if you're looking for an environment where they don't make any, I don't know any place on this planet where you're going to be safe like that. It's just not possible. So I understand what you're saying, and that sometimes it doesn't look private or people may be too aggressive. Yeah, and I'm willing to pay that price to grow myself. Then you continue, and on some of the calls, some of the coaches are rather insensitive to the needs of those who are calling. In fact, those calls sometimes border on more of a group therapy model than anything else. I've heard chastising or suggesting lifestyle changes that seem to border on therapy, and then later gossip about those same people behind their backs. If you haven't seen Real Love Applied, and it sounds like that you're fairly new at this, no criticism of it, but it sounds fairly certain that you are, then as real love is applied, gosh, there are always uncomfortable moments. If I don't know a thing, and I'm talking about the way that my life is going and it's been miserable 1,000 times in a row, well then for somebody to make a suggestion, in many cases that's the only way I'm ever going to see a different way to behave. And, pretty much any time anybody makes a suggestion to anybody, it could look like therapy. Any two friends, as they talk about their lives and say, well, gee, why don't you? That would look like therapy. Anytime a parent tells a child what they should do, that would look like therapy. And And I often hear it said, much like you're saying here, well, now, you can't do therapy. Well, what does therapy mean? Therapeutic, better for you, as in improves the way that you're living. Gee, I hope all my friends would care enough to give me therapy. It may not be professional therapy, but, the people there don't claim to be board-certified psychologists. They do claim that they can, sometimes from a different perspective, see what somebody's doing more clearly than the person can who's completely immersed in it. When you're up to your eyeballs in refuse, it's pretty hard to see a way out. And so most of us what we need most is for somebody to come along and say, you might try this. You might take that shovel over there and dig yourself out of this sewer. Wow, how loving of them. I could see where that would look like therapy. Frankly, who cares if it's called therapy? I don't care what it's called. As long as people don't claim to be offering psychological therapy, as long as they don't claim to be board-trained psychologists, offering suggestions can be very good. Now, sometimes people offer suggestions too early and too often, maybe sometimes too aggressively, but even then, when somebody's dying, emotionally and spiritually dying, and they've been blind to it their entire lives, often making mild suggestions doesn't get through. And sometimes it takes a little animation, a little energy, in order for what you're offering to be noticed. So I really understand what you're saying here, but people need help. People need therapeutic suggestions. And I can see the dangers of that, but gosh, most people who have not experienced real love of their lives are literally dying. You say, you continue. I'm perplexed because on the one hand, the principles ring true, and on the other hand, it seems that when you put your butt on the line and open up, the responses are a bit commentary rather than loving. I get that, and some people do offer suggestions too soon before they really listen, but I've been utterly blind in my life, and I needed suggestions, and most people do. So it's not always something to be criticized to give suggestions to somebody who's lost. Gosh, if I'm lost in the jungle, I'd be just thrilled to have you come along and give me therapeutic suggestions. I feel that you continue. I feel that there is a push toward coaching individually, and that the conference calls are really just a step to get you to coach. Coaching is good, and the assumption that everyone needs one is starting to come across. Coaching is good is what you're saying that people are implying. And the assumption that everyone needs one is starting to come across more than the principles of real love. In anything, there's always a menu of tools and approaches that could be used. That's true in medicine, where I practiced for 20 years, and it's true in improving people's lives. And so there's a real menu of and variation in intensity of the things that could be offered. For example, take tennis. When I was a kid, I went out and just played, just banged the ball around, and I sprayed the ball all over the court. Well, sometimes out of the court. Then I read a book about playing tennis, and I went, okay, I could do that a little bit better, and that helped a little bit more. That was just another tool in the menu. Then I played with people who were progressively better than I was, and that helped a little bit more, but even then my level of tennis playing became just absolutely stuck. And so I hired a coach, and my level of play became explosively better. Happened over a very short period of time, because this coach knew how to play and knew how to teach me how to play. Well, I was grateful for the one-on-one effort. Now, are the more intensive tools more expensive than the less intensive tools? Sure. It cost me a lot more to work with a coach than it did to buy a book. or to just play with other people. But in many things in life, you kind of get what you pay for. You put very little into it, and you tend to get very little back out. And I sure found it worth it to get a tennis coach. And this is true with many people in real love. We're talking about changing the patterns and the inertia of an entire lifetime. And I can tell you that most people can't just read a book and do that. They need the help of people on free conference calls, which you mentioned. Often that's not enough. It takes some intensive work to change direction after that many years, and that's the only purpose that coaching is made available. So, I don't aggressively sell myself as a coach, for example, but if somebody says, somebody just the other day wrote and said, here's the situation in my life and with my wife and with my kids, and it was awful, truly awful. I've now counseled with so many people in the thousands that you kind of get a feel what's going to be necessary. And if I'd simply said, well, go read this book, I don't think it would have made a bit of difference. Considerably more intensive work was needed. And so in that case, I did suggest coaching, and they said, well, how about phone coaching? I said, you're way past that. You're going to actually need to come to Rome and get some in-person, one-on-one, where you can see it and feel it coaching. And that's not what I usually recommend, but boy, in this case, there was no other way that I could see had any chance of success. So there might be some people who push coaching too aggressively. Maybe so, but that's going to be unavoidable. On the whole, though, people benefit most from more intensive work. I know that when I was a surgeon and I offered treatment for cancer, for example, I didn't say to people, so would you like the slow and has a 20% chance of success way? I didn't even offer them that path. I just told them what it would take. We're going to have to go in there and do extensive surgery, and we're going to have to do a lot, treatment afterward, and that's what it's going to take. When they said, well, can we do less? Not really. You just as well do nothing as to do less. And sometimes that's the case in real love. So are mistakes made? I'm sure. But I'd rather have an occasional mistake made in the direction of doing too much than in consistently doing too little so that nobody's ever offended. Boy, if we take the path where nobody's ever offended, nothing ever gets done. Pretty much if you're going to grow and out of where you are, you're going to be offended often. Next viewer says, I'm a terrible listener. Whenever I enter a conversation, I never really hear the other person. Instead, I worry about how I am being perceived, what they are thinking, and what I will say next. Well, bless your heart, because almost nobody's honest enough to say that. And this is actually true of most conversations that I've listened to. Both people appear to be having a conversation. But if you were to type out a transcript of their conversation, Fred said this, then Susan said this, and Fred said this, and you were to correlate, you were to go from when Fred said this, how did Susan respond? And you were to look at those side by side. They're two separate monologues. They're not responding to the other person. Not really. That's very common. And real listening is not a technique that we can learn from a book, although there have been many books on communication written. And the big reason that most of them don't make any long-lasting difference is that real listening is a product of my genuinely caring about you. When I care about you when you speak, I'm riveted to every word you say, to every inflection in your voice, to every change in facial expression, body posture, so that I'm constantly attuned to what you're saying, and I know when to listen, when to ask questions, when to perhaps offer a suggestion. Real listening is a very active, loving experience, and most people don't know how. You continue, in the past, I never wanted to admit this. I labeled my inability to listen shyness. or a difficulty reading nonverbal cues. But I've now started to see it for what it really is. It's a selfish response to a lack of unconditional love. My not listening is an inherently unloving act, because if I truly cared about others' happiness, my focus would be on them, not me. Well, I should have continued to read what you said before I even spoke, because you're just repeating pretty much what I just said. If you've never really been, which reflects possibly a lack of listening on my part here, should have read farther. If you've never been loved yourself, then all you'll know is emptiness. If you've been starved to death all your life, all you're going to be thinking about is me, me, me. And when somebody speaks to you, you're going to see that as another opportunity to fill you. So it's very understandable that you wouldn't listen. Unless you've had it, how are you going to pass it on? You continue. It's occurred to me just how selfish my past attempts at listening have been. I thought that by making an effort to listen better, I was being thoughtful, caring, and loving. Instead, what I was really doing was manipulating others to win their approval, to earn their conditional love. And that's what most communication techniques are. We create the appearance of caring, which is really just so the other person will either like us, so the conversation will go well, so that it will be peaceful, so that we'll get what we want. Well, those are all manipulations. Real listening has no goal for ourselves. You say, I now see why my nervousness has had a tendency to repel others, and why even my successes at listening haven't led to genuine happiness. Without realizing it, I've been conveying to the world an unequivocal, I don't care about you. Which, you're right. But the I don't care about you comes from first feeling the I don't feel loved. Selfishness is a natural child of starvation. So, very understandable what you're experiencing. And how do you change it? Well, it's not complicated. You don't have to go, oh, suddenly I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen better. That might work for a few minutes. Just simply tell the truth about it. And as you see it, realize it, recognize it, talk about it, you will start to make different decisions. Both because you see other choices and because you feel the unconditional love of people who accept you while you're telling the truth about your flaws. Although I suspect, you say, that there will always be some element of hesitation and selfish concern in my interactions, seeing my behavior in this way has already begun to change it. You keep anticipating what I'm saying, actually. As I begin to step out of the victim box and really listen, I begin to love others in the way that I wish to be loved. You just summarized beautifully how real love actually works. Identify the truth, accept it yourself, share it with others, and your behavior will change. So what a nice summary of how to change a life, and thanks for it. This is from a woman who has, in the recent past, had an awful relationship with her ex-husband. Oh my goodness, quarreling and fighting and bickering and resentment and all that stuff. They had conflicts over everything, including, surprise, their 2 children. So she says this: I've been talking to my ex-husband, Fred, regularly for the past few weeks, and so far I've been full enough to converse with him with no effort. I notice so many old patterns of selfishness from him, but I have no expectation for love from him, and I feel so peaceful. No anger or disappointment. And, you've gotten to a place that most people just don't achieve. It's a simple process that we repeat over and over again. See people, tell the truth about them and about your own behavior, feel accepted yourself, and then expect nothing from them, as opposed to I'm entitled to demand this or that thing from you. And as a result, look at the peacefulness of your interactions, because I used to tell you things like this early in your conflicts with your ex-husband, and you were determined to, have him killed. But now you're seeing him for who he is. You're seeing your own mistakes. You're not expecting him to fill you up. And wow, look at this. Here you are regularly talking to your ex-husband when before you just wanted to shoot him. You continue. Today he called to get advice from me about how to deal with our daughter. He said that he'd been reading a book that described teenagers as insane. It said that they are not capable of sane thoughts or behavior. I just listened to him, but I disagree. I think both of my daughters are more sane than most adults that I've met. They make choices and learn from the natural consequences. I don't see what could be considered insane. It seems like excuses for poor, unloving parenting. I see that he really wants to be a good parent, but the places that he goes for advice simply talk about how to change your kid into somebody that's more convenient. You know, pretty much any of our behaviors that don't lead to happiness are insane, but to leap to the conclusion that teenagers are insane is only an excuse for us to continue to be stupid as parents. So certainly teenagers often exhibit insane behavior, but no more insane than that of their parents, and it's entirely understandable. If you and I met and I dragged you into the bathroom and stuck your head underneath the surface of the water in the toilet bowl, how would you behave? In insane circumstances, even the best of people will often behave nutty because they're responding to threats, fear, pain, and that's the position that we put our kids in. We don't love them. We try to control them. We manipulate them. We do all the stuff that kids hate because what we're telling them is, I don't love you. And then we wonder why they behave badly. Well, we just stuck their head under the water and they're thrashing and kicking. So, yeah, some kids' behavior is nutty, but we made them that way. And the cure is, kind of obvious. I was just, days ago, seeing the granddaughter of a friend, and she'd had, many problems in her life. Sexual abuse, been used by a father who was a drunk and an addict and left her, and a stepfather, and used by the father of her best friend and boyfriends, and she had been used emotionally and sexually in countless ways, all by the old age of 16, and was finally thrown out of her own parents' house. And of course everybody's worried about her. Oh my gosh, her behavior is just out of control. What are we going to do? And she came to see me, and she's a delightful kid, full of anger and confusion at the way she's been treated. I just loved her. Taught her a little bit, but mostly as she told her stories, just listened and understood her, because it was easy to understand why she'd feel the way that she did about the things that had been done to her as a child. Oh yeah, at 16 she looks like a woman, but many times I said to her, "You're just a kid." And she didn't hear it in that deprecating way, that critical way. "You're just a kid." No, she heard it in the way I meant it. You're just a child. And here are all these adults insisting that you behave as good as or better than they behave themselves. Well, by the end of the conversation, she was just relaxed. Here was a teenager that everybody in her life had called insane in some way. And remember, she had been sexually used by man after man, and gotten to the point where she didn't even like to look at men, much less have one touch her. And as she was leaving, I said bye, and she started on her way out the door, turned around and said, "Can I hug you?" What a touching moment. All that fear and pain and anguish and confusion and insanity in an hour, gone. Now, does that mean it's going to stay away and that her life's going to be great from now on? No. But in that hour, gone. And so I'll see her again, and we'll talk some more. Insane? No. In pain is what she is. You continue. A few weeks ago, he said that he would read the Real Love and Parenting book, but knowing him, he'll get about 20 pages into it and get distracted. As always, my job is to love my kids, and that's what I'm doing. Well, you've got the picture, sweetie. You love your kids. You accept your ex. You teach him when he's willing to hear it. Either it's obvious by the way that he's talking that he's willing to hear it, or he actually asks you. But you don't get into trying to change him or defend the way you parent or try to co-parent. We're here two ex-partners, and they insist that they raise the children together. Well, if one parent is raising with real love and the other's not, what are the possibilities of co-parenting? If you're the loving parent, you'd have to adjust to the unloving parent. Now, you just unconditionally love your children, and you teach him when he's willing to listen, and that's about the best you're going to get. So, congratulations to you, sweetie. Here's a viewer who says, I have a question. Sometimes my wife and I make plans, and my wife will change her mind and do something else without consulting me. Imagine. Sometimes it will happen about finances. We'll discuss money and agree on a budget, and then she'll ask about going on a trip or buying something expensive out of the blue after we've discussed this for weeks on end. I shoulder the finances in the marriage. This often takes me by surprise and drives me a bit crazy. Now, I don't believe in directing anger at my wife. I haven't for a long time, and that's one of the things I really like about real love. So we don't get mad at each other, and I know I can view it as maybe money retardation on her part and be solution focused. But how do you tell the truth and be honest about yourself? Do I sometimes tell her that I'm hurt? Or would that be a getting behavior? Or maybe do I tell a friend if I get angry and get love from them first? Well, you got a really excellent understanding of things. Being angry would, of course, just torpedo everything from the beginning. So you learned that important part. Now you're kind of concerned that not criticizing your partner means not sharing anything, including how you feel. And that's not the case. Marriage is a partnership, which means that you don't make decisions by yourself that would affect both of you. Now, if you want to make a decision by yourself that affects just you, sure. You want to wear blue shoes instead of red? Well, swell. That's your choice. You want to spend the afternoon watching football? Yeah, that's your choice. But you don't get to make a decision that adversely affects your partner in a way that he or she cannot avoid. And spending money would qualify in that sense. So, I don't get to spend money that my wife might be able to use just because, well, I would like to, because we are partners, not because there's a law that I can't, not out of fear, no, because I love my partner and I simply wouldn't do that. It's not compatible with loving. So you can explain that to her. You can say, what I want most, and see, you have to start out with what's most important. It's not money. You say, what I want most is a feeling of genuine intimacy with you. I want to be able to completely share everything in my life with you, my feelings, my love, my concerns, my decisions, everything. That's what intimacy is. It has nothing to do with sex. That's physical intimacy. It's really sharing ourselves. And then you say, and that requires that we act as partners. And then you could describe how that might look, that you would make decisions together instead of separately. Now, that would mean that in a partnership, she wouldn't go out and just spend money on things without talking to you. But so far, what I've gotten out of what you said is that she's just asking about spending more. In that case, she gets to do that. Let's say in a meeting you've agreed that the budget's tight and you don't have money for a vacation. And then, like you said, weeks later, she brings it up and says, well, I think we should go on a vacation. Well, if that's annoying, then you're just feeling a little afraid that you're being criticized. that the decision that you arrived at together won't actually be implemented, that your intimacy will be affected. So before you get all crazy, if she's just asking about whether you could go on a vacation or buy a new car or whatever, then you just talk about it again. And like you said, though you've talked about it for weeks on end, in a moment that your partner wants to talk about it again, that means you get to talk about it again. So if she says, well, what about a vacation? Doesn't matter that you've already concluded that you don't have money for one. Then you say, well, let's look at the budget. Last month, without a vacation, we barely made it. The month before, with no vacation, we just barely cut it. We just barely met our expenses. And it's been going on like that for 10 months. So if we're barely cutting it, and we're already in a mild debt, for example, and we go on vacation, whatever we spend on our vacation will become instant debt, because we're just cruising right along at meeting, income and outgo are the same. So we spend money on a vacation. It's not like, well, we'll make up for that later. How? We're not. So and this is me speaking as though I were you, I would prefer that we not spend it until either we have it or we see how we're going to get it. That it's, imminent. It's in our near future that will happen. So you just describe that to her. You love her. You don't get impatient. You may have to teach her about finances and balancing budgets if she doesn't know about that. She might be finance retarded. So what? We're all retarded about something. But you patiently teach her rather than be irritated that you're having to go over this subject the way you said it for weeks on end. So what? You just do it again. And if you do that consistently and lovingly, eventually she'll come to an understanding. One reason that people tend to bring things up over and over again is that they've learned from past experience that if they do that, the other person will wear down and give in. And you can't do that either. In that case, just giving in because you hate hearing it would actually be not loving. It's just fearful. So be patient, teach her, see what happens. Here's a viewer that says, I want to talk about the relationship with my mother. As I begin to experience what real unconditional acceptance and love is from people, and what kinds of responses are loving, and what it feels like when I am truly accepted for how I am without having to change anything, I realize that this is not what I get in my interactions with my mother. Now, what you're describing here is very common. Countless people have told me when I've asked them, so what was it like growing up? Oh, my parents were so loving. People tell me that all the time. But the people who are telling me that are completely screwed up. Their entire lives consist of the exchange or trading of getting and protecting behaviors and imitation love. They have no idea what unconditional love is. So this is pretty simple. If somebody who has no notion of unconditional love tells you, oh, well, my parents were loving, what's the possibility that that's true? Close to zero. Just like you come over I go over to your house and I say, so has it rained here lately? And you say, oh yeah, it rains here every day. Well, I'm looking at your lawn that is brown and dead. Then I take a shovel and I stick it in the ground, and I can't even get it in the ground because it's rock hard and utterly dry. What are the odds that it's been raining regularly as you claim? Zero. So it doesn't matter what people say, it matters what you see in the end result. When people are all screwed up and don't know what love is, the odds are just about zero that they had loving parents. And that's the case with you. But you see, if your parents told you that you were loving, you'd believe them. When you're 4 years old, your parents are God. And when your parents say, I love you, what 4-year-old's going to say, well, now, is this unconditional love, or is this, imitation love, which of course wouldn't qualify as real love? There's no 4-year-old on the planet capable of saying that. And so we believe our parents, And then we spend the rest of our lives going nuts with the contradiction. Because we say, oh, I had very loving parents, but then we struggle with trying to understand how very loving parents could have treated us this way. But see, again, our parents teach us without meaning to, over and over again, that however they treated us was love. So, most of us walk away from our childhoods with this horrifyingly skewed and incorrect view of what love is. I will like you if you do exactly what I want. Well, that's pretty much the end of happiness for most people for the rest of their lives. So your parents were not loving, and you're beginning to see that now. It's not an accusation of them. It's just the way it is. And you wouldn't have known that until experiencing what real love truly is. Until you see the real thing, how would you know the difference? You would always believe what your parents had told you, even though they told it to you many years ago. You have to have a reason to disbelieve a thing. You continue. She called today, and I made the mistake of saying how I was feeling. And I can't remember her exact words, but they were something along the lines of that I shouldn't feel what I was feeling, and that I'd been feeling like that for years, so why hadn't I just dealt with it yet? As she keeps reminding me, why am I not just sorted out after all the hours that she has spent on the phone with me over the years trying to help me? How sweet. And she even responded with something like, well, that's just your choice. But it was said in a way that it was a judgment rather than a suggestion. For the last couple of months, I have avoided having lengthy conversations with my mother or talking about anything about what I'm truly thinking and feeling. But I want to have a better relationship with her. I don't want to just avoid talking to her or just talk superficially. But maybe I'm still wanting her to change and give me something she can't. And I certainly can't make her change. I have to bite my tongue sometimes not to say something like, well, if you'd just read the Real Love book, yeah, that'll work, then you'd realize all the mistakes you've made as a parent and stop seeing me as the problem. But that would be attacking her and not very loving, so the only thing I can change is myself. What steps can I take to change me, and any practical steps so that I don't get drawn into these negative conversations with my mother when she visits her phones? So always start with the truth. Kind of like we did it with one other question earlier. When you deal with the truth, everything becomes possible. So, does your mother unconditionally love you? Which is really the only kind of love that counts. So you could really say, does your mother love you? No. And she proves that every time she fails to listen to you, criticizes you, gets angry at you, tries to control you, ignores all of that stuff. And she's been proving it all your life. But what's the rest? It's not just, well, your mother doesn't love you and being snotty about it. It's not going to help. Or judgmental. Why does she not love you? Because she can't. Can't. Not won't. She was not loved unconditionally. Nobody ever stopped her in midlife and taught her how to love unconditionally. And so she's disabled as far as love goes. She has no clue how to love you. She doesn't even know what it looks like, much less how to do it. So she's incapacitated. So if you keep expecting her to be sensitive and unconditionally accepting and loving, who's the problem here? Well, you are, because you have a perspective as to what real love is. She doesn't. You have a hope of changing your feelings, your thoughts, your behavior. She doesn't. She doesn't have any tools with which to do it. You do. Now, that may seem unfair. After all, she's the mother and you're the child. Well, too bad, kid. You can only expect change, or reasonably hope for change, with people who have additional knowledge, something with which to change. She doesn't, you do. So that elects you as the person who's going to have to make some changes here. And the changes initially can just be perspective, realizing that she can't love you. So do you have to get love from her in order to be happy? No, you don't. You can get it from any number of other people, and if you will open your heart to it and accept that rather than demanding it from your mother, Your wounds will heal. You will no longer feel empty and afraid. You'll discover you think differently, you feel differently, everything becomes different as you accept the love from places where you can get it. So you get more loved, and then once you see the truth that she's not capable of loving you, those two things, the anger toward her just gone. It evaporates. You don't control it anymore. You don't grit your teeth. It just doesn't even make any sense. Once you're full and you see that she's not and can't give to you, how could you possibly be mad at somebody who's crippled? And then you do what you can in your relationship with her. You've seen her now, then you gradually come to accept her for who she is, and then bit by bit you practice loving her. Instead of trying to get her to love you, crazy, you make it your goal in life to learn to love her. Now, not all at once. It's not like you're going to leave what I'm saying right here and go, "Oh, Mom, I love you so much. I see what I've done wrong." Not likely. You give to her a bit at a time. So, in your first conversation with her after today, you might say, no matter what she does, I'm going to remember that she's not capable of loving me. So I'm going to talk to her on the phone for 5 minutes. I'm going to time it. I'm going to have a watch out. For 5 minutes, I'm going to do nothing but listen to what she wants, even if it's superficial, and care about her. And when she talks about mowing the lawn and raising petunias, about which you may care nothing, you're going to ask her about those things. Not because you care about the thing, but because you care about her. Whole different deal. And in the beginning, you won't be able to do that for a long period of time, which is why you may set a limit for your conversation. 5 minutes, I can love this woman unconditionally. And you'll discover that at the end of 5 minutes, that's about all you've got. So you say, "Mom, I got to go." "Oh, but we've only been talking for 5 minutes. I know. And I look forward to calling you again on Thursday, in January, whatever." But you will have offered an unconditional gift, and that feels great. Then, bit by bit, you may be able to offer her more loving acts, or the same ones, like listening, but longer, or more frequently, or whatever. But in the meantime, while you're practicing being loving with her and practicing getting love from other people, would it be wise to tell her the truth about yourself, about your feelings, for example? Now, sure, telling her the truth about what you're doing, maybe, I went to work and this happened on my way home, driving in the car. Sure, you talk about things, but in the beginning, you're not going to want to tell her the truth about how you feel, because the instant you do that, you're going to have an expectation, that she will be accepting. She won't be able to do that. So it's not that you're withholding your feelings from her to be mean. It's actually loving, because it's more than she can handle. So why do it? So this business of learning to love a parent who you just realized has not loved you actually has a very practical approach, and it's something that we really can do, and we divide it up into understanding and gradual application. We can do this. I've been talking to a man, delightful friend actually, who had become or has become somewhat discouraged at the path in his life, at lots of things. His interaction with his partner, with his children, with many things. One of which is his tendency to leave jobs undone. And one of those jobs is this complete mess in his basement. He just couldn't bring himself to address this mess. And it kept piling up and getting to the point where it wasn't just messy, but where it's actually interfering with his life. I mean, there are things he needs to do, and he can't even get to them because of the mess. He has projects that, for example, one of his children, he has promised this child, "I will do this for you," a thing that matters to the kid. And he can't do that because some of what he needs to complete the project is buried in this, hellhole of a basement. And it's, really become an obstacle in his life, just having this mess. But it's just overwhelming to him. He just can't even begin it. Finally his son even sat him down and said, Dad, there's some things I want you to hear. And one of them is that you just tell me in 100 different ways you don't care about me. And one of the ways was you don't ever approach this project or that project because of the messy basement. And yet, still, he felt paralyzed and just couldn't do it. So we've been talking. He's just been telling the truth about himself, feeling more loved. And when somebody feels loved, you can make an occasional suggestion. So, I'm just suggesting that with what bit of love he has in his bank, he could then go down to the basement, then move, and I don't mean just move from one side of the room to the other. Move as in hang on a wall, put on a shelf, or throw away 5 things. An old sneaker, a broken hammer, an empty can. 5 things. Every day, though. 5 things takes all of, 10 minutes, maybe a little longer if you're slow. Depends on the things. Doesn't take long to throw away an old paint can. But 5 things, which is a small quantity of time, as opposed to I have to clean out the basement. Which is like, it'll take me to the rest of my life. And so he's been doing that. He writes, I went to the basement last night to throw more stuff out. There was a little path from what I had done on Sunday. Made me smile a bit as I thought about there being some progress, and I didn't have to fight that particular mess that used to be in the path again. A little more went out yesterday. Notice how he even says it in the passive tense. A little more went out. Even reluctant to credit himself for doing something here. No, you did this. A little more went out because you went down there and filled a commitment to take out 5 things or whatever you ended up doing. That's another thing, is that if we commit ourselves to do 5, we tend to, while we're there, feel good enough that we do 10. But you make a commitment to 5, just do 5. It gets you started. My fight is against complacency and laziness, you continue. I need to remind myself of the reality that exists and the temporary happiness I feel from accomplishing of the reality that exists and the temporary happiness I feel from accomplishing a little, and that can be greater if I continue to accomplish small things daily. Many people I've known have struggled with, well, why am I lazy? As though somehow it were an inborn trait. I'm just genetically lazy, and so there's never anything I can do about it. Woe is me, it's hopeless. You see where this goes? And perhaps the most prominent reason that I've seen for people being lazy is that, at some point in their lives, all of our lives, we worked hard to achieve some kind of happiness. And for most of us, in the beginning, that came from pleasing other people. So if we worked hard and we did things right, then Mom would smile. Dad would say, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." So we worked hard to get that. But as is true with every form of imitation love, the more we go to a particular well to draw out of it, the deeper we have to go. The harder it is to pull it up out of the well. And the less likely it is that the people that we go to get it from will even give it to us. So now, when you were 2, not messing your pants got you a compliment. Well, people don't usually compliment you for not messing your pants now. It takes a little more than that. And that's true with just about everything in life. We used to have to do very little, and then we have to do more, and then more. And before long, it's like the all-encompassing effort of our lives to get people to praise us, to think well of us, to accept us. And then eventually we get to the point where we realize that no amount of that conditional acceptance is ever going to make us happy. And then at some place, and it may not happen all at once, but we just give up. It's too much work to do all this, to earn a little conditional acceptance. And finally we just go, well, heck with it. I don't really care. And if people don't accept me, well, too bad. And if I don't get that feeling of accomplishment from, doing a thing well, that really was kind of fading anyway, so why try? And that can look like, or could be, laziness. It's really just giving up and realizing that all that effort just isn't worth it because it didn't give us genuine happiness. And we're not willing to buy the imitation love and the temporary superficial happiness that we got from it. So it's like, pfft. But when we discover a way to work differently and to get a different reward, not to work harder. Gosh, if somebody simply tells us, well, try harder. Oh, most of us have gotten to the place where we're not willing to try harder to find imitation love because we somehow know it's not going to work. But if we can try differently for a completely different reward, we begin to get or experience or see kind of that ray of hope in the distance that, whoa, there might be a glimmer of happiness in our futures. And then we're willing to try more and eventually completely change the pattern of our lives. You continue, it occurred to me that my mind may be like this, full of messes and untidiness of things that haven't been spoken and shared with others. And little by little, I'm able to smile more. I don't even remember a lot of what was said last week. I do remember talking with you on the phone and crying. And if I continue to do a little bit daily, I can become even happier. It's all about happy. When we give up earning imitation love, and when we know how to find real love, then it's not more work. It's actually easier. When we share who we are, we begin to feel loved. When we tell the truth about our mistakes, we begin to see other ways to behave. And then we experience the possibility that we might actually find what we've always wanted. And then naturally, we become more responsible because it leads to a genuine feeling of satisfaction rather than feelings of earning approval or gaining power or, whatever other form of imitation love we've always used. So these have been, wow, I don't know why it seems unusually so, but very good questions that bring out what leads to a path of real love in our lives. And I'm grateful for the people who would share their lives with us in these intimate ways. So I look forward to talking to you all again in a week on Tuesday. And between now and then, as always, just remember that it's always about real love. See you in a week.